Hanger Lane is not a station I like very much. And that's a little unfair because there's nothing wrong with the service, the staff, or even the basic design. It's just that, well, Hanger Lane is here, next to one of London's busiest, scariest road junctions. The main entrance is on this corner, and to approach it from any other direction requires this gloomy subway. The junction is known as the Hanger Lane Gyratory. Hanger Lane Station is at Hanger Hill in the borough of Ealing in West London. It's on the Central Line and opened in 1947. The line through here actually dates back to 1903. I talked about the line in a bit more detail in my video on Perivale Station, but, long story short, it was built as a link between the Chiltern Main Line and the Great Western Main Line. Hanger Lane Station replaces an older station named Brentham, which in turn replaced an even older station named Twyford Abbey Halt. Hanger Lane sits between the sites of these stations. In 1903 there was no Hanger Lane Gyratory. There was just, well, Hanger Lane itself. In the 1920s, the A403 Western Avenue was built. This was soon reclassified as part of the A40. In 1928, the section of Hanger Lane north of the station was upgraded to an arterial road. In 1936, the North Circular Road was extended to Hanger Lane, and the result was a rather chaotic junction. Hanger Lane Station was actually built by the Great Western Railway as part of the New Works programme. Under this programme, the line from North Acton to Denham was to become part of the London Underground Central Line, but in practice, the takeover only got as far as West Ruislip, which remains the terminus to this day. As part of the takeover, the Great Western Railway assumed the responsibility for building or rebuilding the stations along the route. The stations from Greenford to Perivale were designed by the company architect, Brian Lewis. At Greenford and Perivale, Lewis had fairly free rein with his designs. But at Hanger Lane he was constrained by the need to fit the station around the junction, such as it was back then. Originally, the station was to have been rather grander, extending over the bridge here. But there were a number of factors that resulted in the project getting trimmed back. First of all, there was the Second World War, which delayed the start of construction. There was a shortage of labour in the post-war years. And there was also a shortage of materials due to post-war reconstruction, which prompted Lewis to rethink his design. Construction proper began in 1946. That same year, Lewis resigned from the Great Western and continued his career in Australia. The station was completed under Dr. F. Curtis, his successor. Despite the limitations placed on Lewis and Curtis, they created a station that is, in my opinion, more than meets the eye. Above ground, as underground stations go, it's all right. I mean, to me it looks kind of like a municipal leisure centre from the 1960s. It's not as exciting as, say, Southgate, which also uses a round building on a corner site. But when you get inside, you have this rather magnificent waiting room set below ground. I particularly like this uplighter, which was actually installed in the 1990s and is the same as the ones at Gants Hill. Originally, both of those stations were lit by fluorescent lighting strips, but London Underground thought that uplighters, inauthentic though they might have been to the original design, would give a more pleasant effect overall, and I have to say that I agree. There was also an experimental set of television screens set along the platforms to play adverts, but this concept didn't really work out and was removed not long after. As a result of the shortages of labour and the delays caused by bad weather, Hanger Lane Station wasn't complete when it was opened on the 30th of June 1947. The original station building was an ugly box made of breeze blocks, steel pipes, and corrugated iron. It wasn't until late 1948 that the current station was completed. In 1963, the road junction was grade separated, with the A40 running underneath and new slip roads to connect it all together. The Western Loop, including a new railway bridge, was completed in the late 1970s. The end result is a junction that isn't Britain's most complicated, but we are in West London, where there are many cars and drivers aren't the most patient. It's sometimes called Dysfunction Junction, which I think would look pretty good in the Johnston typeface on the front of the station. There were plans in the 60s and 70s to give London a whole network of motorways, and Hanger Lane would have been part of this, which would have made it even more hellish. Fortunately, the gods of town and country planning smiled upon the city and declared that it was not to be so. With this junction, I don't think it would be possible to cross on foot without ending up in the plot of a J.G. Ballard novel, so there is a similarly complex system of subways to provide access from the station to, well, everything else. In the tunnel that leads to the station, there's a set of reproduction London Transport posters to liven things up a bit, although sadly they have been somewhat despoiled by graffiti and stickers left by people who still think the impact font looks pretty snazzy. Despite the chaos up above, the station itself is very pleasant on the inside, and you wouldn't think you were right next to one of London's most notorious sections of road. There are plans to provide step-free access, which can only be a good thing. With a frequent service into central London, at least there's nothing dysfunctional about the station. Well, I hope you enjoyed this gridlocked tale from the tube. If you did, please do leave a like, subscribe for more, hit the bell icon to be updated when my new videos go up, and other such wonderful things. You know, when I was filming this, a young woman came up to me and, seeing me peering quizzically at the station from across the road, asked if I needed help. "I'll say I do," I replied. "It's a bank holiday and I chose to come to Hanger Lane." Well, actually, I didn't think of that until about 5 minutes later. Anyway. Thanks as always to my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon. You are the slip roads to my grade-separated junction. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.